Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar. Hope everyone's having a great day so far. And my name is Lauren Hogan. I'm a marketing specialist here at JMT Consulting, and we're very excited to have our own Scott Hollrah from Venn Technology joining us today for the webinar, Seamless End-to-End Integration of Your Donor Systems. Just a few quick notes before I turn it over to Scott here. We are going to be recording this webinar, and so we'll send out a recording and slides within 24 hours after it has concluded. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we'll save them all until the end of the webinar, but don't hesitate to submit them as they come. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Scott, to get us started.
All right, thank you so much. Well, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're located. I am Scott Hollrah. I'm the founder and managing partner at a firm called Venn Technology. We're located in the Dallas area, so not sure where everybody's coming from, but for me, it's about 1 o'clock just after lunch. A couple things about me. I am a very proud fighting Texas Aggie. I don't know if there's any Aggies on the call, but if so, whoop. Over the years, I have had the opportunity to work with all kinds of technologies. When I started my career in the technology space, I was working with construction accounting and project management software. And over the years, I've just got to see and touch and work with a lot of different things. Today, though, myself and my firm, we're focused primarily on working with Salesforce.com, which we'll talk more about in a minute. And then we also spend a ton of our time building integrations with a mid-market ERP system called Sage Intacct. We'll also touch on that further. I've also had the privilege of working across tons and tons of industry verticals, from, like I mentioned earlier, construction, real estate, to manufacturing, hospitality, energy, and then I've spent a lot of my career actually working in the nonprofit space. Little trivia tidbit for you: I actually worked at JMT many years ago, and so spent many years working exclusively with nonprofits. And so with that, a couple other things I mentioned. We're in the Dallas area. We opened an office in Washington, D.C. We did that last year. We signed our lease on March 11th of 2020, and you guys can guess how great of timing that was. It was just awesome. But we're glad to have a presence up there, no less. Then we have something we call our brand promise, and that is that we create systems that free people to focus on what they're best at. So often we get into conversations with people who are burned out because they were hired to do, strategic, higher level things for the organization, but they end up exporting data from here and having to mishmash it in Excel and then pray and hope that it balances and everything goes into the new system properly. We want to take that off your plate and get you back to doing those higher level, higher value kinds of things for your organization. We love what we do so much that we actually wrote a song and produced a music video. So when you get the slides later, you can click on this, you can go out to YouTube, and you can hear our hit single, Integrate, Automate, Be Free. So kind of drilling in a little bit more on kind of what we do. I mentioned Sage Intacct a minute ago. So we have a very different relationship with Intacct than JMT does. In fact, what we do is very complementary to what JMT does, not competitive. JMT, if you're already familiar, they would help you implement Intacct, get your data migrated from your legacy accounting systems. Our role in the space is to help Intacct work with all kinds of other applications. So we are known as a marketplace partner. If you go out to the Intacct marketplace, you'll find that we've got a couple of listings out there. And while we do have some things that we do just a ton of, for example, integrating Salesforce with Intacct and Stripe with Intacct, at the end of the day, we can help integrate anything that has an API to Intacct. And it seems like every day we're getting calls from people saying, hey, it's not Salesforce or it's not Stripe, but could you help us integrate this other application into Intact? And the answer is almost always yes. Talking a little bit about Salesforce.com. So we are also a Salesforce partner. And in our Salesforce practice, we'll do everything from a ground up implementation. Maybe you're on razor's edge and you're wanting to get on something more modern and robust. We can help you make that transition. If you're already on Salesforce, we oftentimes come into an organization and help them make it work better for how they operate today. And something that's just really important to note is that everybody on our team is certified in one, if not many, disciplines within the Salesforce world. And one that I'm particularly proud of, we've got that little red line calling it out. On our team, we've got one of the very first ever nonprofit certified consultants in the world. When they rolled that exam out a few years ago, one of our team members was one of the very first to actually achieve that certification. So we're really proud of that. At Venn, I talked earlier about all these different technologies that I've worked with over the years. And one of the things that's just really core to who we are is that we want to configure things wherever we possibly can. And we like working in tools that give us the ability to configure as opposed to having to write code. For us, code is a last resort. Unfortunately, with the tools that we work with like Intact and Salesforce, a lot can be done through that configuration as opposed to writing code. Other things that are really important to know about us and how we operate is that we look at the big picture. So often we'll get people that'll call us and say, hey, can you help us integrate this system with that system? And we'll typically say, yeah, we can do that. But you know what? We've got to think about the things that feed that source system. Is there a source for the source? And we'll see an example of that here later. And then, I know you just wanted to get the data to this point, but is there something else that comes after that? So we really try to take a look at the big picture. And from there, drilling into where does the process truly begin? Where does the process truly end? There's so much to take into account. So real quick, we're going to do a quick poll. And so I'm curious to know a little bit more about the audience. When the poll comes up here in just a second, if you'll tell us, are you using any systems that we've got listed out there? So take just a minute and fill that out. All right, hopefully everybody's had enough time to do that. We can close out the first question. All right, so we've got a little bit of Salesforce, a little bit of Razor's Edge, and a little bit of something else. All right. All right, so the next thing I'd like to know is how well are your systems integrated? Are they working just in perfect harmony? Are they, it could be better, or not at all? This is usually when I'm giving this presentation in a room and I ask people to raise their hands, when we start getting up to like a 7, that's where people's hands start falling down. So curious what our group is like today. All right, let's go ahead and close that out. All right, one of you is like rocking it with integration and the rest of you are feeling some pain, I'm sure. Okay, super helpful. Fantastic. Well, I suspect that for those of you that you're struggling with those integrations, I imagine that it makes your life a lot harder. And so today we're going to kind of talk about what it might look like to have things more streamlined and how to get there. So with that, let's keep going. So it goes without saying that today we use tons and tons of different applications. If you look at this screen, my guess is that you use 3 to 5 and probably a whole lot of other systems. I think of the logos that are on here today, I know I've interacted with at least 5 of them, just, in the half day that I've been at work. And today, things just need to work together. There's the technologies that are available are too powerful for things to not just flow seamlessly from one app to the next to the next. And so an example of that, in fact, we're going to show you a live demo of a process like this. You ought to be able to have somebody give on your website, have that donation flow into your donor management system, and then on into your accounting system without a human ever having to touch that. And this is very, very possible. And again, in the modern day, these things should just work together. Maybe you're an organization that does a lot of events prior to the pandemic. And you had some kind of event registration. Here again, when that constituent goes online and registers for your gala or the golf tournament or the 5K, that ought to push into your donor management. So you've got that 360 view of that donor. And then again, we ought to be able to record that revenue over in your accounting system very easily. So some of these things, I think they kind of go without saying, but I think it's good to ask, why should we have things automated and integrated? And no surprise, when we're doing things manually, it takes a lot of time and it can be very error prone. I like to say that every time you touch the data, every time you crack open Excel and start doing something to it, you just run the risk of messing something up. And then the downstream impact of that is that you don't have timely insight into critical measures about your organization. So we're going to take a minute and talk about a few different ways to integrate systems. And the first is the good old export and import. And I'm sure that pretty much everybody has done this at some point. If we're coming up on the end of the month, maybe you'll be doing that for your payroll here in the next few days. So on the plus side, when we think about the export import, it's free, and I use free in air quotes, and that's because there is a cost to your time. And the more that we have to do to actually get that file ready for import, the greater likelihood that we're going to have errors with it. I had a client years ago down in Austin, Texas, who brought us in and they said, hey, we need to get our data from Salesforce to Intact. And they weren't quite ready to make it a fully automated process. They said, hey, can you just build us an export file and then we'll go import it? And I said, yeah, we can do that. I'd like to caution you against that because there can be errors with that. Well, about 2 weeks after we built this for them, I get a phone call. Hey, I got a problem. So-and-so was out last week and I imported the transactions from these dates. And when they came back in today, they re-imported this week and the dates that I imported for last week. Can you help us sort this out? And so there's just lots of ways that we can make mistakes when we're doing this the good old export and import way. One thing I do think is worth noting is that sometimes this is the only option. And in those situations, exporting and importing, as time consuming as it may be, as error prone as it could be, it sure beats having to key all that information in by hand. All right, the next integration I want to talk about is what I call a packaged integration. And so if you were to go out to the Intact marketplace, you're going to find things like Bill.com that have these pre-built, ready to go, plug and play integrations that just connect right in. And on the plus side, they can be fantastic. They can be super quick to get up and running. And over time, usually as you're paying for that system, the publisher of that system is going to make enhancements and push updates. So over time, you should actually get more out of the application because of those new features that they add. Having said that, and we run into this a lot on the Salesforce side, is that a packaged integration may not actually do the things that you want it to do. Yes, it may get data from here to there, but it may not get the right data. It may not pull, it might not put it into the right place in the target system. And then the other thing to take into account is that if you've made any kind of customizations to your systems, and again, we see a lot of this in the Salesforce world, is that sometimes package integrations don't play well with the customizations that you have done. So you really have to think that through. And so to tell a little kind of personal story, at one point we used to use MailChimp to do our email blasts. And we tried using it in conjunction with Salesforce using their prepackaged integration. We have built some things in our own Salesforce environment that are a little bit unique in how we store data. And at the end of the day, their packaged integration, their standard integration, while we were able to set it up in like an hour, it didn't do what we needed to do. It didn't get the data in from the right place in Salesforce to the right place in MailChimp. And so one of the things that I recommend everybody do if you are considering a packaged integration is you really need to map out what is the data that I need to get from here to there, and does it support it? And a good way to do that is just to build a list and have somebody help you evaluate, does this packaged integration push the data from the right place to the right place? And so as it relates to Salesforce and Intact, Salesforce, the Intact does have a packaged integration for Salesforce, but the things that it does don't necessarily match up with how a nonprofit would use things. Typically, we don't see nonprofits using sales orders and items and things like that. I should add a little caveat here. Since I've been in the space, Intact has actually come out with a new integration for Salesforce that does make it work a lot better in the nonprofit space. But for a long time, this kind of setup was all that we had available to us. And so, oftentimes clients were looking at other ways outside of the packaged integration to integrate Salesforce with Intact. All right, the next option. This is the one that I think most people think of when they think about integrations, and that is custom code. When we do custom code, when organizations choose to go the custom code route, on the plus side, you get exactly what you want. As long as the APIs are there to support the kinds of things you're trying to accomplish, you're going to be able to get that integration to do whatever you want it to. However, it's usually the most costly. It's usually going to take longest to build. You don't get flexibility. And if you need to make changes, you've got to get the developer to come back in, dig through tens of thousands of lines of code, find that one little spot, make the change, and then go deploy it across the development environment to the test environment to the production environment. And it can be really, really, really time consuming, even on the maintenance side. All right, this brings me to the last option for integration, at least that we're going to talk about today, and that is something called middleware. Middleware, as the name implies, is software that sits in the middle of other applications, and it takes data from a source. Sometimes it does some kind of transformation to the data. Maybe the way that you get a date out of one system is formatted month, day, and then four characters for the year. And the target system takes it as day, month, and then 4 for the year. The middleware can actually interpret that and do the change so that it goes into the new system the right way. Much like custom code, when we work with middleware, you get exactly what you want. As long as the APIs are there to support it, the middleware can get the data in and out however you need it to be. With middleware, you can easily chain things across multiple systems, and we'll show some examples of that here in a minute. It typically is a configure, not a code, and so that makes it a little bit faster and a little bit less costly in terms of the human effort to get it built. And then we also get great error handling and retry mechanisms. So if something didn't go across, you can go in, make your change, whatever that needs to be, and easily push that back through. Now, on the downside, though, you are going to have an ongoing investment in the middleware application. And because it's not packaged, you're not getting updates to the integration itself. If you do need to do something else to it, you do have to go in and on your own make those changes, which certainly comes with a cost. So let's talk about some examples. And so this is a real example from a client that we worked with many years ago. Client working with refugees around the world. They do just awesome work. And if you look kind of on the left-hand side of that, you're going to see PayPal, Authorize.net, and Stripe. They are all online payment processors. If there's a way for you to give them money, they are all about it. And so they take money by all kinds of different means. In this example, they actually had some developers on staff that built their own integrations into Salesforce using custom code. And then within Salesforce, there was some packaged integration with a tool that helps them generate their acknowledgments and their thank you letters. And that's tightly built right into Salesforce, no code, no middleware, just ready to go. And then there were other parts of their organization that we did integrate through middleware. So one of the things that this organization does is that many of their refugees that they work with are artisans of sorts, and they make candles and beautiful woven items and all sorts of these handmade goods. And so what will happen is the refugees that they are caring for will produce these items, and then they'll actually sell them around the world. And they do that through an e-commerce site called Shopify. And so there's a lot of moving parts and pieces here. And this kind of gets into that extensibility that we talked about with middleware. In this example, when they add a new product that they're going to sell, well, they go and they put that into Shopify. And when we go to handle an order and handle the financial aspect of it, well, the accounting system needs to know what was it we actually sold them. And the CRM needs to know as well, because it becomes part of their customer profile. We know this person really likes candles, so we need to know who's bought candles so that we can go and let them know we've got something new in. So when you add that product flows through the middleware into Salesforce and into Intacct, so we have a consistent ID across all these systems. And then when that order gets placed, the same thing happens. We'll update the donor record to say that so-and-so bought this, and we'll push that financial transaction over into Intacct. Another example here, and again, this uses kind of a combination of different things. So this organization used an online fundraising tool called Pure Charity, where they had a pre-built, ready-to-go integration for Salesforce. But they had some other systems that didn't. And we were able to actually take these exports and build out a workflow in which they could save a spreadsheet, save a CSV file into Google Drive or Dropbox. And we could automatically pick that up, push the transactions over into Salesforce, and then every night push the financials over into the accounting system. So there's all kinds of different ways to go about it. And there's not a one size fits all. Sometimes you use a combination of methods to handle different aspects of your organization. So before you start down the path of building an integration, there's some prep work that really has to be done on the front end. And the first thing is you got to begin with the end in mind. I can't tell you how often we get phone calls from people saying, hey, we want an integration between this system and that system. We go, great, we can do that for you. What do you want it to do? And they don't really know. They just know they want their data coming across. And so you've got to be able to finish the sentence, when my systems are properly integrated, they will. And so one example would be, sync all of our customer data across systems so that users can see full order and payment history in each application. So that's that kind of e-commerce example where we need to know the history. Our day-to-day system users, they're not in the e-commerce system, they're in the CRM or the donor management. Or another example is when our systems are properly integrated, they will provide access to summarized journal entries for all donations on a daily basis. So you've got to really be able to think through and articulate what that end state needs to look like. The next thing, I mentioned this earlier in the intro, talking about process and where things begin and end. Process is a huge part of making an integration work well. And we get into so many organizations where when we have our kickoff meeting to get the project going, we'll have a handful of people in the room and we'll ask the question, okay, how does this particular process flow? And the first person will raise their hand and they'll say, well, it works this way. And then the second person will say, that's not how we do it. It goes like this. And then the third person says, you're both wrong. It's like this. And so these integrations are not going to work well if you don't have everybody on the same page. And sometimes taking on a project like this causes you to kind of reevaluate and revamp some of your processes. But you can't move ahead until you got everybody on the same page as to what the process is. And again, where does the process actually begin and where does it actually end? I know you're saying you just want this to talk to that, but sometimes things are feeding into or out of each of these systems. And then something else to think about, and this really ties into that process, is what should actually tell your integration when to run? Is it the sort of thing that, hey, when this thing happens in this system, go do that? Or does it take somebody clicking a button saying, hey, yes, this needs to go over there? Or do you want it to run on a schedule? Every night at midnight, go grab yesterday's donations and push them into the GL. So lots of different ways to go about these things, and you really have to have a plan for how you're going to take this on. The next consideration, and this is huge, that is, what is the quality of your data? We've all heard the expression garbage in, garbage out, and that saying's been around forever, and it's really been in the context of reporting. But in the integration world, it is equally true, and we can create a lot of pain and heartache for ourselves if we're integrating messy data from one system into another system. So things you need to do, assess before you take on a project like this is, what is the quality of our data? Do we have duplicates? Is the data accurate? And do we have things that are missing? If you got a mess, you need to clean it up. Otherwise, you're going to have a mess in two places, and nobody wants that. And then the other thing that we have to think about is having common identifiers across systems. And so I gave the example earlier of that e-commerce setup where we sell these products. Well, there are downstream systems that in order to have a transaction flow through, we've got to have it linked to some master data. And these systems all have to be on the same page as to what product it is we're talking about. And so sometimes you got to do some work to get consistent IDs set up across these applications. All right, I am going to back out of the slides here, and I want to take you through a pretty common workflow, a pretty common example of an integration that we build for our nonprofit clients. And so what we're looking at here is an online fundraising tool called Raise Donors. We do a lot of work with this product, and so Raise Donors is super easy to set up. We're going to come in here and we're going to create a new fundraiser. We are calling this our 4th of July fundraiser, since that's coming up in a few days. So with Raise Donors, we just created that, and they're going to give us this nice page where people can go out and make donations. I should note though, while we do a lot of work with Raise Donors, we can facilitate this type of integration with just about any online fundraising tool. When we created that fundraiser over in the donor management system, we had something downstream happen. We're using Salesforce as our donor management, as our CRM, and we created a fundraiser over in Salesforce when we created the fundraiser over in the donor management system. And of course, when you get into the demo, it doesn't work. Bear with me here. Well, that has not come across yet. Well, it worked yesterday. All right. So we'll just use one that we have recently created. And so yesterday in preparation, I created one called June Demo, very clever. And when that campaign got created over in the CRM system, now Salesforce is not happy. When this campaign got created in the CRM system, it also created a project down in our accounting system. And so nobody had to hand key this. This happened completely seamlessly, automatically, as we like to say. And so now when somebody goes in and makes a donation, we'll make a $50 donation here. When somebody makes a donation, that's going to flow right on into the accounting system. And it would be represented in a record like this. And that donation gets tied back to the fundraiser. In this case, we call it a campaign. Donation gets tied there. And then we know based on the payment method, we know based on the campaign, we know exactly how to code that over in the accounting system. So we knew which debit and credit, what project to tie it to, what the restriction was, and we're able to see this over in the accounting system without a human ever having to touch it. So anyway, this is just one example of tying multiple systems together in a completely automated fashion. And even if you don't have a process that works exactly like this, hopefully it gives you a sense for what can be done. And so with that, I think we'll open the floor up for questions.
Yeah, don't forget you can submit your questions through the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, or we can also take them through the chat. Also, if you have any questions that come up following the webinar, we also would be happy to answer those if you just contact JMT or contact Scott directly at Venn Technology. He would be happy to help answer as well.
I think they're all just awestruck over, the power of automation.
Oh yeah. Well, Scott, do you have any final comments then? I guess we can wrap up early and give everyone some time back.
Sure. No, hope this was insightful, and if we can be of assistance, please let us know.
Yeah, we can also send out Scott's contact information through the follow-up as well. So thank you so much, Scott, for being here today and for your wonderful presentation. And thank you everyone for joining us. We hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.